Hi there, my name's Tick. I'm a transgender law student in Scotland, and I've seen a lot of hullabaloo regarding the conversion therapy draft bill. But before we get into that, I need to put forth some disclaimers. First of all, I'm not a solicitor, I'm not an advocate, none of this is legal advice. This video has been made for educational purposes. It's a topic I'm interested in, and it's a topic that affects a lot of LGBT people in the UK. Secondly, the bill in question, as it stands right now, is a draft. It's subject to change. Please keep in mind the date of publication, because this very well could become outdated quite quickly. Third, we haven't used any AI in the production of this video. This channel stands firmly against AI. You're entitled to your own opinions, of course, but I won't be utilizing it here or in the future. Fourth, I'm not infallible. If I've made any errors in this talk, please politely point them out in the comments. I'm all for open discussion, but I won't take being mean, really. Fifth, I will be referring to people who have undergone conversion therapy as victims. This is simply because it limits the amount of times I have to say conversion therapy, which doesn't work very well for my accent. And I think that just the nature of this process is very degrading and humiliating. I don't think it's a process we can call someone going through being cured or treated or a patient. I think that puts too much clinical onus on this barbaric thing. And finally, trigger warnings. This is a serious topic and has real world consequences. It's not possible to have this discussion without bridging into uncomfortable territory. You have been warned up front. If I can figure out the timestamp feature, then this will be broken up into chapters, which will be easy to navigate. References will be on the left and a bit of the corner of the screen, if the source isn't just visible on screen already. With all that said, sit back and please enjoy the show. In July of 2018, Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May made a statement on the government's commitment to banning conversion therapy. 2 years later, Boris Johnson then pledged the same thing. Even the recently dispositioned Prime Minister Starmer declared back in 2021 that the Labour Party stood firmly against this practice. And in 2022, YouGov found that roughly 60% of the British public want conversion therapy banned. It has been made clear by both Parliament and the populace that these vile practices are not wanted by the majority, and it would seem that this long overdue official stance from the government might finally be here. After almost 8 years and a handful of prime ministers, the Office of Equality and Opportunity, directed by Marcus Bell OBE and Minister Olivia Bailey, published a draft conversion practices bill. Fantastic, right? Well, some aren't so sure. There are many fears regarding whether this ban will inadvertently ban trans healthcare, or if it will be used against LGBT education in schools. There's a lot of confidence in the sentiment that this ban will only really apply to the NHS, leaving the private sector completely unaffected. A certain amount of pessimism is healthy. The skepticism in your government and what it's planning is a good thing. However, at a certain point, it can bridge into doomerist conspiratorial attitudes. Is this bill an example of pessimism going too far? Or are these fears justified? Well, today I wanted to really dive into that. In this video, we're going to discuss a few things. First, I want to go through what actually is conversion therapy. There's a lot to discuss around this topic, and I understand that it's quite challenging. Few truly understand what this practice involves and entails, myself included prior to researching this video. I want to discuss what conversion therapy actually is, and what it is we're banning. Second, I want to go over a little history regarding conversion therapy. Some law, some major cases, how other countries are dealing with this problem, and have done in the past. Next, we're going to go through the bill itself, segment by segment, line by line. Legislation can be written in a rather confusing way, sometimes like riddles. It's usually not intentional, but sometimes it's an unfortunate side effect of trying to encompass a broad topic in one document. Finally, I want to bring it home with a neat little bow. Heartwarming conclusion to end. Before we carry on, I just want to clarify, this isn't an argumentative essay. We should ban conversion therapy. It is wholly my opinion that we should. And if you hold an alternative by the end of this, I don't think anything will change your mind. The intent here is to discuss the problem and evaluate the latest attempt by the government to solve it. Conversion therapy is, in essence, the act of using therapy to convert someone's sexuality and/or gender to fit a heteronormative perspective. It seems to be a fairly recent notion that one whose sexuality sits out with the realm of heteronormality is a condition that must be cured. Whilst the details are far more nuanced than we have time to get into, throughout most of human history, and most of the natural world, being LGBT has seemingly been a rather mundane and uneventful quality. Through our species' long and complex history, it wouldn't be until 390 CE that homosexuality would be deemed an illegal criminal act in ancient Rome, of all places, which feels like a long time ago, but in the grand scheme of human existence, this was a couple thousand years ago, basically last Tuesday. And yet, a silly little German man in the 1890s decided to do the impossible. He made a gay man straight, allegedly, with the use of hypnosis and frequenting a brothel. Because there's absolutely no other reason a man of science would find himself frequenting a brothel multiple times per week. As History.com writer Aaron Blakemore puts it, he didn't know it at the time, but he had just kicked off a phenomenon that would later be known as conversion therapy. A set of pseudoscientific techniques designed to quash LGBT people's sexuality and make them conform to society's expectations of how they should behave. Much like how Among Us kicked off a violent trend of simplistic but goofy party games, being one worse than the one before, so did our German fellow, with each iteration of conversion therapy being more inhumane than the last. But some spinning discs and waggling of watches paired with some brothels was far from the only methods used to achieve this goal. No, people's hatred of the LGBT was far too strong to leave it at that. Methods used for the majority of this trend's lifetime was known as aversion therapy. In name, you may not have heard of it, I hadn't, but in practice, you have, almost certainly. This included, but not limited to, election shock therapy, wherein the victim would be shocked with, guess it, electricity. Inducing vomit, where the victim would be forced to vomit through various strong pharmaceuticals to be taken when one has undesired thoughts. Ice baths, just plunging the victim into an ice bath through associative conditioning of the victim's sexuality to the unpleasant experience of being plunged into ice, typically as a form of punishment for having undesired thoughts. Oil burning, where they would use electric coils to burn the victim. Hard labor, where the victim was put to work to the point of near collapse. All of these methods had but one goal: to associate the victim's undesired thoughts with unpleasant or downright violent experiences, causing the victim to fear their own sexuality, in a way that puts them on the straight and narrow, for lack of a better term. With the exception of electric shock therapy, which is still used today under anesthetics and with far more complex equipment, more than just high voltage, these methods have more or less ceased within the United Kingdom. Strict aversion therapy, as a form of conversion therapy, has been banned by most institutions and medical practices, though I want it to be noted that there is no explicit legislation criminalizing the practice in its entirety. Many publications will tell you that these methods are still legal, and I get it. That gets clicks, and drums up support for the eventual banning, and in a technical sense, they're not lying to you. The UK government, as it stands in July of 2026, has no explicit bill with the royal assent that specifically bans aversion therapy and criminalises the previously mentioned methods. That is true. But it doesn't sit right with me. You see, whilst we don't have a law that does that very specific task, we do have laws that do other things which inadvertently ban these methods. Firstly, the Offences Against the Person Act, 1861, in which Section 47 plainly states, "Whosoever shall be convicted upon indictment of any assault occasioning actual bodily harm shall be liable to be kept in penal servitude," i.e., you cause harm to the person resulting in bruising or visible damage to the victim, you breached a law here. So the methods such as electric shock therapy, ice baths, coil burning are all already banned by this. So the theory goes, but we'll get back to that. I have more legislation to throw you. Within Opus 61, we also have Section 23. Whoever shall unlawfully and maliciously administer to or cause to be administered to or taken by any other person any poison or other destructive or noxious thing, so as to thereby endanger the life of such person, or so as thereby to inflict upon such person any grievous bodily harm, shall be guilty of felony, being convicted thereof shall be liable to be kept in penal servitude for any term not exceeding 10 years. This section covers induced vomiting, which the primary method was being given drugs. With regards to hard labour, well, you can thank labour laws like HASWA 74 and the Modern Slavery Act of 2015. To completely outlaw this method of aversion therapy, you can't work someone to the point of near death or collapse knowingly, and you need to provide adequate breaks. These laws don't explicitly ban hard labour and aversion therapy, but they do ban the very practice of doing hard labour to a dangerous degree across the UK as a whole. We can see that there are already laws to ban these aversion therapy practices, which, at the time of writing, I suspect it might partially be why lawmakers haven't published a solid ban on these. It's already banned, right? So remember when I said "so the theory goes"? I'd hope so, it was a few moments ago. Well, we need to get into the weeds a bit now. And if you're new to law, this might take a second, but I'll go slow. And we'll get through this together. You're doing great, honey. Mwah. Everything we just mentioned is in theory utterly useless to us. When it comes to banning aversion therapy, the keen-eyed among us will have noticed the year on our OPA bill, 1861. And 1861 does indeed come after 1890. So our bill predates these methods of conversion therapy. So what gives? Well, consent. Consent was believed to be sufficient enough of a defence against Section 47 breach of OPA. The NHS itself operated these methods of aversion therapy through much of the 1940s and 70s, all protected under the guise of informed consent from the victim. In the United Kingdom, law is not a singular thing derived from a singular source, but instead is a concept derived from the sum of various parts. It's in this that two seemingly contradictory statements can be true. This legislation bans the act itself, yet we had it institutionalized through a government system through the guise of informed consent. So, why don't we see it anymore? Has new legislation come through? Laws split into two kinds of sources, if you will, statutory law and common law. Statutory law is your Acts of Parliament, your bylaws, your statutory instruments. Common law is your judicial precedents and your equity. Both of these systems work in tandem with one another. You go to statutory first and then go to common law to fill in the blanks, or expand upon the vagueness found within statutory. So how does this affect aversion therapy? Well, in 1993, the House of Lords confirmed, like validated or doubled down, on the conviction appeal of 5 men who had committed sadomasochistic sexual acts, of which the men consented. I won't read the acts aloud, but Sylvia, put them up on screen. Pause if you want to read them. This common law principle to attach to our 1861 statute that strips consent as a valid defence from Section 47, meaning that it was only in 1993 that we invalidated consent as a defence to conversion therapy through aversion therapy. But to be clear, it is illegal to do these things. They're not legal, and I could not find any evidence that they were still in considerable practice. Quick aside, because it doesn't fit anywhere into the whole video, but I found it darkly funny that it offhandedly mentions on the case report, the facts given rise to these charges come to light as a result of police investigations into other matters. The police just kind of walked in on these 5 men doing awful things and went, "Dear God," and arrested them on the spot. If you want gory details and way more depth than I'm allowed to go into on YouTube, and you can stomach long documents and legal documents, then go give the case a read. It's in the reference bin below. You just can't predict where it's going next. It takes a turn every fucking second. The more notable method that I'm sure you're all shouting at your screens right now was surgical. The most infamous outcome from Alan Turing's homosexuality charge, but for those who don't know, in 1952, World War II codebreaker and famed for spearheading the team that cracked the Enigma machine, was found to be having sex relations with a young man, and was subsequently convicted of gross indecency, i.e. being a homosexual. His punishment? Chemical castration, of course. Whilst chemical castration was indeed a punishment for both men and women charged with homosexuality at the time in the UK, it was also done worldwide voluntarily by those wishing to convert to heteronormality. But it wasn't always chemical. It was not uncommon for surgical castration to be used as a means of curing homosexuality. Surgical castration came in a few different flavors, but the main one was a bilateral orchiectomy. This was a complete surgical removal of both testicles and the sperm duct. There was also a subcapsular orchiectomy where they surgically scooped out the glands inside the testicle that produced sperm, leaving the sac intact. The ultimate goal of this was to reduce sperm and testosterone in men, ultimately resulting in a noticeably less homosexual outlook. However, there's no evidence to suggest this actually worked. Another major form of conversion therapy through surgery was a lobotomy, a completely barbaric procedure that was predominantly used on women experiencing emotion in the early to mid 1900s. It involved using a hammer and a chisel, for lack of a better term, to sever or damage pathways in the frontal lobe to cure various mental conditions, from menopause to being gay. I don't want to spend too much time on the intricacies of lobotomies because, quite frankly, it's a tangent in and of itself. It could go on for an hour. YouTube documentarian Joe Scott has already made that hour, an in-depth video about the subject that I highly recommend you go watch to learn more about this topic. So what is the legal status of these surgical methods? Well, they're already very illegal in the UK. Both chemical and surgical castration through our dear old OPA 61, and lobotomies, whilst not being illegal through OPA, has been banned by all medical institutions and practices within the UK. Consent is not an excuse for the same reasons it's not a defense in aversion therapy. This segment seems short, but quite frankly, there isn't much more to say on this topic. I've yet to see any institution claim that this is still a legal practice, nor did I find any claims that it was an ongoing practice. I just think it's worth noting what we used to do to other people, to fix people. The single most popular and famous method. South Park has ridiculed it, Simpsons has parodied it, and American Horror Stories portrayed it, among other things. But what actually is it? Have you ever stopped to think about how these missionaries actually go through with it? My research has found two main methods that stem from very different schools of thought regarding religious proclivity: Evangelical and Mainline. And let me tell you, whilst one is far more extreme than the other, we can't disregard the traumatic and very real damage both of these methods have on victims who go through with these throughout their life, both psychologically and physically. None is truly worse than the other, just different sides of the same coin. The evangelical route involved procedures like exorcisms, not too dissimilar to that you would see in a horror movie expelling the demons away. Draper was told to repeatedly shout a prayer during the 20-minute session, which left him cramping up and struggling to breathe. Some reports had people held down whilst prayers were chanted at them, having oil and ointments forced onto the victim. These rituals seek to mock and degrade the alleged demon within the victim, but I think no words I could conjure can match the sincerity of Draper's. In the following weeks, he said, he felt like he was a skeleton, adding, "It left me feeling totally empty and not feeling myself. Like a part of myself had been pushed away, was still very much there." These sadistic, thinly veiled attempts at fixing individuals do nothing more than make the victims feel hollow and shameful. It is a farce to assume that the perpetrators here are well-meaning. It is nothing but an excuse for members of these churches to degrade and humiliate LGBT members under the defense that they are curing them of an illness, expelling a demon, and bringing them closer to God. This form of conversion therapy, whilst not as common as Mainline, is still very real and ongoing. Most major congregations, such as the Church of England and the Church of Scotland, have openly condemned conversion therapy, but it is not extinct and it is not illegal. This is a real practice that affects people to this day. Roughly 19% of conversion therapy victims were one of rituals of this variety. This is one of the forms of blatant abuse that needs to be addressed by any bill seeking to criminalize this act. The other route that I'm labeling Mainline is more akin to treating homosexuality like an addiction, a desire that must be pushed aside rather than a demon or possessions. The methods range from less severe AA meetings, where cured authoritative figures help guide meetings, to more severe methods such as prescribed marriages and social isolation. They all, however, revolve around not giving in to temptation and using willpower and strength through God, often attained through prayer and action, to simply not be gay anymore. However, these are often referred to as fake it till you make it methods by the victims who previously underwent this treatment. The Ozone Foundation did document that in some extreme cases, forced sexual act between the ascribed marriages was required by churches to recondition and complete the healing process. An act of sexual assault where both participants are the victims. This can't have been anything other than life-changing trauma. When I mentioned both methods of religious conversion therapy were inhumane, I truly meant it. Whilst evangelical methods are typically one-off traumatic events that stick with the victim for a lifetime, Mainline is far more subtle for the majority and is a prolonged psychological torture. Religious institutions utilize and exert their status and authority to demonize their communities, and no matter which way you slice it, this is abuse. These methods are legal. Whilst they are abusive, there's very little the law can do to prosecute and tackle these things. These methods, whilst denounced by most major churches in the United Kingdom, do exist and do affect people to this day. Gallup found 27% of all conversion therapy cases involved in religious institutions, with 68% of cases found to be ongoing or very recent. This isn't a problem of the past, a relic of a bygone era. It's a very current reality for many LGBT individuals across the United Kingdom to this day. It isn't just religious institutions that exert their authority on LGBT individuals. The single largest ongoing method of conversion therapy that threatens marginalized groups in the UK is through pseudo-psychological methods that are real therapeutic techniques that are being twisted and used from the perspective that being LGBT is either a developmental disorder or an addiction that needs cured. Make no mistake, these are not being used by real therapists. The wider medical and psychological society has completely and utterly renounced conversion therapy in all forms. Instead, these are administered by counselors and life coaches. These are much like Andrew Tate's and Strauss's of the world. They assert their authority and methods without needing to actually be licensed therapists. The techniques involved include making the victim overanalyze their own history to find patterns of broken behavior to correct, using CBT to realign the victim's mannerisms and expressions to a more heteronormative fashion, using overextensive surveillance to monitor the behavior of the victim, isolating the victim from other LGBT members of society, ensuring that their circle is that of only anti-homosexual, cis, straight people. These are real and legal techniques, and not even scratching the surface of it. This is by far the most common one, with Gallup finding that 81% of all victims of conversion therapy have undergone this form of treatment. Once again, I cannot stress this enough, this is a very real and ongoing problem within our society. This isn't some foreign or niche issue, this is the reality for many LGBT people. What does it say about society that we allow this to continue going on? I wanted to go into a bit more depth as to how conversion therapy actually works, because it not only gives us a better understanding of how to define it, but it also illustrates some misconceptions surrounding it. And I at least think it also reinforces why it needs to be banned in the first place. So with that said, what is it? Gallup, a leading charity on the subject, defines conversion therapy as any practice which tries to change or suppress someone's orientation or gender identity. This may be committed by family members, community members, or groups, religious leaders or organizations, health workers, counselors, therapists, other practitioners within the well-being sector. I agree with this definition. I think it encompasses virtually all discussed here and elaborates on it. From a colloquial or even dictionary perspective, this is a solid and well-outlined definition, and I would argue that you and I, we both understand what's being said here, right? From a legal perspective, however, I have my nitpicks and my concerns. For starters, there is such a problem as lawfare, and I could see this being weaponized in this vein is quite vague and relies on a lot of prerequisite knowledge, which, if not defined or outlined in a bill, could lead to misinterpretations. Whilst common law can come in clutch here, it took 134 years for the question of consent with regards to Section 47 of OPA 61 to be decided. Law do not turn fast, and a bill without these definitions could face significant backlash, possibly even impact schools and practitioners that are helping trans individuals transition and find their identity out with heteronormality. This is not to say this definition here is wrong, but that it cannot stand on its own. This is a complex topic and will take more than a paragraph to outline within the legislation. Might this be a clue as to why they've never attempted this before? Have they attempted this before? Well, simply put, yes, there have been multiple attempts at a ban on conversion therapy. In 2018, just 1 week after Theresa May's pledge, a bill was introduced to Parliament via Geraint Davies MP that proposed to link conversion therapy to pre-existing legislation regarding counsellors and psychotherapists. By making it regulated rather than banned, this would mean that practicing conversion therapy, whilst not necessarily a criminal act, would at the very least be grounds to revoke your license, preventing you from practicing it further. So what happened? Some big squabble? Did the right fight it vigorously to hold on to their conservative values? So much worse. A fate worse than any bill can face. It ran out of time. Parliament often runs on something known as the clean slate rule, where once the parliamentary session runs through to the next year, any bills that have not yet passed through the appropriate stages essentially die unless agreed upon by both houses. Unfortunately, this bill by Davies MP just didn't get carried over, and so it sits there dead. The bill tracker by Parliament still has it sitting there saying awaiting date for its second reading, which is insane. In 2021, Baroness Solihull sponsored a bill in the House of Lords which proposed to criminalise the act of giving someone conversion therapy, a subtle but important detail, rather than conversion therapy itself. The idea was that banning the dishing out of the conversion therapy but maintaining the practice legal, you aren't pushing innocence into the crossfire of the bill by targeting the supply chain of the problem itself. This also had the added benefit of protecting religious freedom, which is often a counter to the ban of conversion therapy in the public sphere of debate. Unfortunately, this just begins a game of getting bogged down with semantics, and theoretically it wouldn't really have solved terribly much regarding the problem of innocence getting hit in the crossfire. The bill itself was vague and did very little to outline what actually is conversion therapy. Regardless, just as before, the bill fell out of time and subsequently fell out of favour. Gone too soon. This wouldn't be the end of the Baroness's attempts, however. In 2023, Lady Burt struck again with yet another bill proposing to ban conversion therapy, this time just to make the act itself illegal, as opposed to the provision of the therapy. It also explicitly mentioned transgender individuals, with her opening speech noting a disproportionate number of cases of trans victims of conversion therapy compared to LGBT victims, with 7% of LGBT victims to 1 in 7 trans people. This, however, ultimately fell through due to a snap election being called in 2024, but it wasn't the only bill thwarted by that general election. Whilst the Baroness Burt was working away within the House of Lords, a Labour MP by the name of Lloyd Russell Moyle had introduced his own bill in the Commons the same year, just 1 month after Burt. This aimed to criminalise conversion therapy in much the same way as the Baroness's bill, though had differing language in regards to the trans inclusivity. Unfortunately, these bills both fell victim to instability of our government during these trying times. It's not like there hasn't been attempts. I mean, really, the only thing that makes this draft unique without going into the bill itself is the timing of it. Its first reading was in springtime, and the backing of multiple public consultations that have actually finally concluded, along with various polls that confirm that it's what the public wants. King himself mentioned it in his speech as a desire of his. Not that the youth of our country cares what the king says much anymore, but it's an important note nonetheless for our voter base. It might be worth just having a quick aside here. I can give you a crash course on how bills become acts in the UK. If you already know this information, then skip ahead to the timestamp on screen here. If you don't, however, this will be most informative. We'll keep it pretty short and concise, but the gist of it is as follows. Step 1. Writing the draft. This is typically done by lawyers aided by MPs, since not all MPs have a background in law. Step 2 is the first reading. This usually is just the title being read aloud, as well as the MPs and other sponsors who might be backing it. Step 3 is called second reading. Principles and the core concepts of the bill are discussed and debated as opposed to the nuance and the semantics. Step 4 is called the committee stage, where the House debates the bill in detail and goes through all the semantics, ensuring that each clause is agreed upon and amended or removed. Step 5 is the report stage. If not done by the whole House, then the whole House has the opportunity to protest and debate the bill. Step 6 is called third reading. This is reading of the bill as amended. No changes may be made at this stage. In step 7, we repeat the whole process again in the alternative House. So if it started in the House of Lords, then the bill will then be read again in the House of Commons, vice versa. It will go through the whole process again. Step 8, if all tickety-boo, it will be whizzed off away to the reigning monarch to have their stamp of approval, known as the royal assent. If the opposing house doesn't like it, it starts the whole process again. Bills need realistically make it through at least one house during a parliamentary session, and that's springtime to springtime usually. If they don't, they will fail. Now, of course, there was more to this, but this is just the gist of it. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled programming. So if Parliament has more or less failed us in the last 10 years on this topic, what does common law have to say on the matter? What have the courts decided? Well, due to a lack of statutory criminal law, there's little specific to conversion therapy itself. In the criminal courts, we are sort of relying on the previously mentioned case of R.V. Brown, but I really must stress that this only applies to criminal courts. Civil courts are a different beast altogether. Consent's back on the menu, boys. Due to one of the older common defences of volenti non fit iuria, if the victim is an adult and sits through non-physically violent sessions of conversion therapy, such as, but not limited to, AA meetings, talks, sermons, then the victim technically consented to the process, and so the pursuer would likely fail in their case against the defendant. This defence is what's known as a complete defence in tort law, and if the defendant can successfully establish it, then they're absolved of all liability and the pursuer will receive nothing. It's not all doom and gloom on the civil front, however. We have foundational cases that protect against severe mental harm, with Wilkinson v. Downton 1897. This case outlined that severe physical or mental harm, even in the absence of the direct contact from the defendant, is grounds to be held liable. Ultimately, this means that a victim can sue for the harm inflicted upon them by their perpetrator and does open the door to the conversation of conversion therapy within courts. Now, this still has to work side by side with our consent defence, but it must be noted that R.V. Brown established one can't consent to excessive physical harm, and minors are not capable of consenting regardless in a legal capacity here. Ultimately, with regards to civil law, the mere notion of conversion therapy is, in essence, fundamentally an example of a damnum injuria datum breach, which is a foundational legal principle within delict and tort law in the United Kingdom. Utilizing your scope and authority as a psychiatric practitioner, or someone alleging they are vis-a-vis counsellor, unlicensed therapist, to administer a form of therapy that actively causes harm onto that victim is in and of itself a breach of your duty of care, which is in and of itself a reason to sue. Due to the nature of consent, the civil courts are more often than not falling flat on their face when it comes to prosecuting conversion therapy, and this is even with the added benefit of on the balance of probabilities. This is not to say it's impossible, but it's just that it's much harder, especially with how the modern landscape of conversion therapy is. There is significantly less reliance on physical and unconsenting methods. The eagle-eyed among you might be asking, how is it consent if they were coerced? And to that, I might say, of course it's not consent. That's called undue influence, you muppet. if I were mean-spirited. Alas, I'm as humble and gratuitous as they come, so let me instead answer your question like this. In the UK, we have a principle known as undue influence, which comes in two forms: actual and presumed. Actual undue influence is where the victim must actively prove that their family member exerted excessive pressure over the victim to coerce them into giving consent. This can be through emotional manipulation, guilt-tripping, isolation, such as threats of grounding, or blackmail. Presumed undue influence is simply where the law already recognizes that a power imbalance exists, such as that between a parent and a child. A court will examine the situation, and should the act which the child could still be over 18 has consented to benefits the parent, this could be a fiscal benefit, this could be the exertion of agenda or beliefs or whatever, then the burden of proof is then shifted onto the parent to prove that they did not coerce their child into giving consent. As a result, we have boundaries where consent can't be used as a defense within civil courts. This is not as clear-cut and takes a level of proof to be presented that might just not be possible to bring forward. In many cases, at least under actual, and where the burden of proof is placed upon the parent, we see time and time again in cases, admittedly not specific to conversion therapy, where this has failed, and said cases have set a precedent of the level of proof required which often can't be ascertained. There is one more avenue of defense against conversion therapy in the civil courts, and that is called inherent jurisdiction of the High Court. This is England and Wales specific, wherein the High Court can completely disregard any admission of consent by the victim, provided they are younger than 18, and to issue an injunction to override the parents or guardians and protect the teenager. This is typically used against arranged marriages, but can be used against medical treatments, and that's right, has been used against conversion therapy in the past. While its flaws are great, the civil courts do currently offer the greatest defense against conversion therapy. But they do lean on reparations rather than prevention. It is real hard to sue someone for an act they haven't yet committed, and as a result, the most significant preventative measure the civil courts bring is just fear of financial loss on part of the perpetrator. And this, to me, just further highlights a necessity for criminal legislation and parliamentary intervention. So, we've established firmly that the UK's attempts at banning this have been lackluster at best, to say the least. And with our strongest defense being the fear of being sued, it's all starting to sound a little American when it comes to protecting these rights. So one might ask themselves, well, is it even possible? Can it even be criminalized? I mean, surely we as a nation can't be the only one failing to protect marginalized groups. This has to be a universal problem, right? In the year of the Tiger, 2022, Bill C-4 was enacted by Canadian Parliament under the leadership of famed future husband of the singer Katy Perry, Justin Trudeau. This bill took just shy of 2 years to fully go through Parliament and makes the provision and advertisement and profit of conversion therapy a federal crime. It also has a clause that protects children from being removed from the country to undergo this form of therapy, making this too a criminal act on both the parents and the perpetrators. An offence against this bill can result in up to 5 years imprisonment and classifies the act of a parent or institution trying to remove their child outside of the country as international trafficking, with fines being up to the discretion of the court. The bill prefers incarceration as the primary form of punishment for conversion therapy. While C-4 has been effective against professional healthcare clinics across the country, essentially creating a stranglehold on the practice in most professional settings, halting all public advertisement of the process to the public, it has significantly had less of an impact on the religious sector. And as it stands today, has been no movement on the legal front, no major arrests, and no major trials. Previous data showed that roughly 2/3 of victims experience conversion therapy via religious institutions, which, as previously mentioned, have been seemingly relatively unaffected by this bill. So, have they succeeded? Many argue yes, many argue that it's too early to tell. I'd argue that there's a grain of truth to both sides, that yes, it's too early to tell, and we simply just don't have enough data to back any of these claims up. But it's also clear that the bill hasn't been as damning as initially thought. But it hasn't done nothing. Again in 2022, the French government, led by Emmanuel Macron, passed with an almost unanimous vote, mind you, the aptly named Law Number 2022-92. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? This bill criminalizes conversion therapy with punitive measures ending in prison time ranging from 2 to 10 years and punitive fines ranging from 30,000 to 45,000 euros. PBS mentions that the bill also opens the floor to civil lawsuits on behalf of all victims, which has led to religious sects to cease even localized advertisement. Ingeniously, the bill uses class action suits to threaten the underground scene, where a civil court is less burdened by the same level of proof that a criminal court is, meaning it not only aims to protect those going forward, but also introduces potential punitive measures for existing victims who have already found themselves free of the clutches, though not free of the consequence and trauma. But has it worked? Well, by most accounts, yes, kind of. Seems to suffer the same problem as Canada, where underground and unadvertised is almost impossible to track, but it has at least served the function of eliminating further advertisement and perpetration by medical institutions. All the way back in 2016, under the government led by Joseph Muscat, the Maltese government became the first country in Europe to officially ban and criminalize conversion therapy. Their introduction of the Affirmation of Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, and Gender Expression Act took only 1 year to get through Maltese government. Now, admittedly, I know nothing about Maltese politics, so that could still be a deathly slow process by their standards, but from where I sit, god damn, that's quick. Among many things, this bill criminalizes conversion therapy by placing liability on the healthcare and counselling professionals involved, with punitive measures of up to 10,000 euros and a year in prison. Whilst this bill saw a reported near 100% effectiveness on the advertisement and existence of conversion therapy within Maltese borders, much like Canada and France, the limits of this bill were tested in April of 2022, where charity worker and Christian advocate Matthew Gretsch was asked to speak on his experience of conversion therapy on a Maltese news platform. He was later ordered to appear in Maltese court on the charge of advertising conversion therapy. Failure to appear would be criminal and he would face arrest. After preliminary hearings in June, Gretsch would begin his trial and ultimately conclude with him being exonerated by the court, with the judge stating that the bill does not ban the open discussion or free speech regarding conversion therapy, which some LGBT activists have criticized. Well, simply put, yes, it seems that banning it would appear to be more than doable. Many countries, not just the ones mentioned, have succeeded, and whilst there's no guarantee that these attempts have eliminated the problem 100%, that's not now, nor has it ever been an excuse to stop trying to prevent crime. We don't just legalize all murder because it still happens, we take efforts to mitigate and introduce punitive measures for murder. This same philosophy should apply to conversion therapy. Banning conversion therapy and introducing punitive measures has almost entirely worked on a professional and advertisement front, and has helped limit the knowledge and spread of religious institutions offering their pray the gay away methods. To add to this, from my findings, none of the countries mentioned have backfired and prevented trans people from transitioning. France has one of the best trans healthcare systems in the world, and to this day, almost all of it is done via socialized healthcare. Both Canada and France have clauses in their legislation that strictly exempt institutions from being prosecuted when providing trans healthcare, and to date, I could find no evidence of these bills being used to prosecute counsellors helping LGBT find their sexuality. These guys have loophole prevention built in. In Malta, the largest case regarding this bill was against someone advertising conversion therapy in the media. Gretsch won the case, so it's not like these bills are restricting religious institutions from having an opinion against LGBT either. At the end of the day, laws are enforced by individuals, and so long as the laws are maintained and respected, then common law will often prevail on the limits of legislation and help protect people it is intended to protect. At the very least, that is the outcome we can glean from these countries that have already banned it. It is worth reinforcing, however, that most countries that have legislation against conversion therapy have loophole clauses built into their system, which feels like a pretty important inclusion for any legislation the UK would seek to introduce. Inclusion would help dispel the concerns of the LGBT community that are concerned, and help flesh out any bill passed to help alleviate any what-ifs that Parliament might have in its debate. And so here we are. It all comes down to this. 7,000 words in the script to get us to this main subject of today's video, the draft bill itself. We've already established that it's a doable cause, and whilst other countries have not 100% eliminated the problem, they have hindered its advertisement and popularity as a method, stopping many institutions, both private and religious, from continuing entirely. We've outlined some factors that this bill would need to address, and discussed where previous attempts have failed, though admittedly not by their own fault. We know that for the most likely chance of this bill actually being beneficial, we need to have clauses that prevent the bill from being specifically utilised against the LGBT. It needs to be specific, and it needs to punishment and due process outlined. As I've seen the notion spread in the comments of Instagram and Reddit and whatnot that this bill is nothing but posturing and grandstanding against a non-existent problem, I want to just reiterate, as we have multiple times throughout this video already, that conversion therapy is a real problem. YouGov and Gallup found that roughly 1 in 5, that's 18%, of LGBT people in the United Kingdom have been subject to the conversion therapy practices. They found these practices to be widespread and a current risk to the LGBT people in the UK today. So let's have a look at what Olivia Bailey MP and co have put together for LGBT people across the United Kingdom, and then we'll discuss its impact, both literal and wider reaching. Section 1. Meaning of conversion practice and related terms. Subsection 1 just outlines what this section will be discussing. Subsection 2. Conversion practice means, subject to subsection 3, any conduct carried out by the person towards the individual with the intention of A. Causing the individual to 1. To have or not to have, 2. To believe that they have or do not have sexual orientation or A. Particular sexual orientation, or B. Causing the individual to 1. To have or not to have, 2. To believe they have or do not have transgender identity or a particular transgender identity. Subsection 2 is where we are defining who conversion therapy might target, and gives us our first puzzle piece into the definition of conversion therapy. By this definition, the bill does include people who are already aware of their LGBT nature and those who would be typically the target of conversion practices, but also extends the definition to people who are comfortable in their sexuality assigned at birth, who might otherwise be convinced to turn gay, if you will. Subsection 3. Conduct which A. is carried out by a person towards the individual with such intention, but B. is carried out in the course of providing healthcare services to the individual concerned, is not conversion practice unless the person acts in a way which falls below the standard of reasonably expected of a person in their position. Subsection 3 outlines intent. This clause gives us protections to therapists and counsellors to continue aiding LGBT individuals in their exploration of their sexual identity. This is because an LGBT therapist or a trans clinician is working within what is reasonably expected of their position. It protects legitimate healthcare services whilst limiting nefarious intent. This is good. This is part of our checklist. This helps prevent the bill from being weaponized against LGBT individuals and institutions. Again, this closes the loop. Subsection 4. Subsections 5 and 6 apply for determining whether the conduct involved in a conversion practice carried out on an individual amounts to the abuse the individual and so is an abusive conversion practice. Subsection 4 simply specifies that the following two sections, 5 and 6, will aid in establishing whether the conduct has been abusive and thus amounting to conversion therapy. Subsection 5. The question whether conduct amounts to an abuse of the individual, a question in fact to be determined by reference to all circumstances of the case, including in particular the nature of the conduct. Subsection 5 just states that each case should be treated on a case-by-case basis. This bill doesn't seek to offer a rigid or strict definition for that what would be counterproductive to the cause. It states that the courts can't use pre-existing checklists, though it does not limit various tests from being developed in the future by the court systems. This harkens back to our common law. A. Words or behaviour of a sexual nature. B. Violent or threatening words or behaviour. C. Controlling or coercive words or behaviour. D. The use of economic pressure. Or E. The use of psychological or emotional pressure. Subsection 6 seeks to establish some of the things the courts must consider when discussing a case relating to conversion therapy, and includes factors as economic and familial pressure via points C, D, and E. This is another good point. It seeks to attack various kinds of conversion therapy. These factors include evangelical, mainline religious, and pseudo-psychological. It also helps establish grounds for the consent defense to be dismissed through D and D. Subsection 7. Sexual orientation has the same meaning as in the Equality Act 2010. See Section 12. Subsection 7 just seeks to define what sexual orientation is, and to do that it has referenced existing legislation that already has a comprehensive definition. The definition is on screen now, and if you're an audio listener, don't worry, we'll come back to this soon. You'll see legislation do this a lot. We do it again later. Referencing other pieces of written works within government bodies, it's not an uncommon practice, but can make navigating legislation a bit more of a nightmare and tedious at times. Subsections 8. The circumstances in which an individual has a transgender identity include, but are not limited to, where A. The individual is proposing to undergo, or has undergone a process of gender reassignment. B. The individual is transsexual. C. The individual identifies as neither male nor female, or as not solely male or solely female. Subsection 8 outlines the definition of transgender people. The wording of point A includes those going through DIY and on a waiting list. Point B and C includes non-binary people and transsexual people as well. Whilst there is a debate within the online trans community as to whether or not non-binary people should fall underneath this umbrella term, this bill includes them seemingly just to limit the amount of unnecessary extra steps required, streamlining and simplifying the process, identifying potential victims without getting lost in semantics. Whilst I won't entertain nor engage with the aforementioned debate here, I will state that for the sake of this bill, this is a good thing and serves to protect you regardless of where you stand on this issue. Subsection 9. In subsection 3, healthcare services means A. All forms of healthcare services provided for individuals, whether relating to physical or mental health, and B. Procedures that are similar to forms of medical or surgical care but are not provided in connection with a medical condition. Subsection 9 seeks to define healthcare services as outlined in subsection 3, and whilst it's a little like a riddle here, but this provides a specific safe harbour for those individuals who are carrying out medical attention in a legitimate form. Since subsection 3 is our loophole clause to protect the bill from being weaponized against LGBT individuals, this just seeks to help define that subsection. Section 2. Offence of carrying out an abusive conversion practice. Where Section 1 is relating to definitions and scope, Section 2 seeks to define what the actual criminal act is. Subsection 1. A person commits an offence if the person carries out an abusive conversion practice on an individual which causes A. serious harm to the individual's physical or mental health, or B. serious alarm or distress to the individual which has substantial adverse effect on their usual day-to-day activities. Section 2, subsection 1 just outlines the scope of the criminal act. It makes it clear that this bill will not just be targeting the act itself, but the outcome will also be a factor. This is particularly useful when establishing long-term methods like mainline religious AA meetings. I should note that Section 2 is just focusing on the perpetrators here, and doesn't seem to include any mention of advertising or encouragement specifically. Subsection 2. Person found guilty of an offence under this section is liable to A. On summary conviction, to imprisonment for a term not exceeding the general limit in a magistrate's court, to a fine or to both. B. On conviction of the indictment, to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, to a fine or to both. Subsection 2 swiftly outlines punitive measures that will be in place to someone found guilty of administrating conversion therapy, with a prison limit maxed at 5 years. Summary conviction is just a faster, less severe process to criminal conviction within English and Welsh courts. It's a more streamlined process. Section 3. Offence of encouraging or assisting an abusive conversion practice performed outside England and Wales. Section 3 just seeks to bring some attention to areas that were previously missed in Section 2. Subsection 1. A United Kingdom person commits an offence if A. The person carries out conduct in England and Wales that is capable of encouraging or assisting the carrying out by another person, outside England and Wales of an abusive conversion practice on a United Kingdom individual which is likely to cause 1. Serious harm to the individual's physical or mental health, or 2. Serious harm or distress to the individual which has substantial adverse effect on their usual day-to-day activities. And B. Person intends to encourage or assist the carrying out of an abusive conversion practice on the individual. 1. Seeks to define conversion therapy in a way that applies to attempts undertaken abroad. Meaning, taking someone to another country to undergo conversion therapy is just as much of a crime as to administer conversion therapy within the UK itself. It also specifies it is an why can't I just read? It also specifies it is an offence to assist or encourage this practice to an individual with the intent of making them travel out with the UK for it. It follows the same definition as before, which places importance on the aftermath as well as the act itself. Subsection 2. Person is not to be taken to have intended to encourage or assist the carrying out of an abusive conversion practice on an individual merely because it was a foreseeable consequence of the conduct in question that it would encourage or assist the performance of such a practice. Subsection 2 outlines that you can't be found guilty just because your actions have inadvertently resulted in a person attempting to undergo conversion therapy. This protects therapists who might help people explore their sexuality. Should a parent take the outcome of a therapy session of their child to coerce them into conversion therapy, the therapist would not be liable for this, even though their sessions would have had a known potential outcome of this happening. This is in fact a good thing, and a well thought out potential abuse of this bill. This should help therapists feel less pressure about discussing these topics with clients, a common concern cited of these bill proposals. Subsection 3. An offence under this section may be committed whether or not a conversion practice is in fact carried out, outside England and Wales, on a qualifying individual. Subsection 3 just outlines and reiterates what was hinted at in subsection 1, clarifying that this is an offence whether or not you should do the act on UK soil. Subsection 4. In this section, A United Kingdom person means a United Kingdom individual or body incorporated or constituted under the law of any part of the United Kingdom. B. United Kingdom individual means an individual who is a United Kingdom national or is habitually resident in the United Kingdom. Subsection 4 seeks to outline what a UK national is. This helps give clarification on how enforcement of subsection 3 will be carried out, elaborating that if you are a UK national, part of a UK-based institution, or the victim is a UK national, then a crime has been committed. This should help prevent having foreign institutions undergo conversion therapy in foreign places with the intent of hiding behind, well, it wasn't me, or I'm not in the UK. Subsection 5. In subsection 4b, United Kingdom national means an individual who is A. a British citizen, a British Overseas Territories citizen, a British national, overseas, or a British overseas citizen. B. a person who under the British Nationality Act of 1981 is a British subject, or C. a British protected person with the meaning of that act. Subsection 5 just continues to define who is subject to the offence, and seeks to close off avenues of potential loopholes. It basically just expands on the definition of UK national to even those who live in overseas territories like the Falklands or Gibraltar, or asylum seekers, immigrants, foreign students who are currently studying here, are all under the protection of British law. Subsection 6. A person guilty of an offence under this section is liable of a summary conviction to imprisonment for a term not exceeding the general limit in magistrates' courts, to a fine, or to both. B. Conviction of indictment to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, to a fine, or to both. Subsection 6 just clarifies punitive measures for all the offences listed in Section 3. They are identical to the punitive measures put forth in Section 2. Section 4, Conversion Practice Protection Orders. This section introduces CPPOs, which will allow the courts to issue interdicts and injunctions to prevent travel abroad with the intent of protection potential victims of conversion therapy. We'll get to this later. Section 5 is outlining who is going to be held liable in the case of an institution undertaking conversion therapy. The table provided is quite concise, so I won't over-explain, but I will say, Sylvia, if you could throw it up on screen now, feel free to read through it. For our auditory listeners, it's pretty much whoever's in charge will be indicted of the crime if it should happen under the incorporated or unincorporated bodies. Section 6, short title, Extent and Commencement. This Act may be cited as the Conversion Practices Act 2026. 2. This Act extends to England and Wales only. 3. This Act comes into force at the end of the period 2 months, beginning with the day which it was passed. Section 6 just clears some things up. Firstly, what to call the draft bill. There's some irony in me having dead named this bill the entire time. If I didn't, this joke wouldn't have worked. It also specifies when it will be coming into effect once passed, and it will also only affect those in England and Wales. That's most of the bill. There are another 12 sections that go into detail on how CPPOs work, but we will get to that bit later, since, quite frankly, that's a separate kettle of fish. Instead, let's take a step back and look at this bill as a whole. First thing I think we should address is the scope of it. I believe this bill does a good job at specifying who the perpetrators are, and whilst the definition of conversion practices could be a little bit more strict, the fact it gives provisions in place specifically to ensure each case is treated as its own thing, along with a way to help guide the courts into finding whether or not a practice is defined as conversion therapy, is ultimately a good thing, and really will help common law come in to fill in the blanks a lot quicker. The bill has taken care to consider potential use cases where it may harm LGBT individuals. I understand that with Section 1, Subsection 2, people will have immediately had their concerns, and I can totally see where the concerns regarding it being weaponized against the LGBT come from. But further reading of this bill demonstrates to us that this simply isn't the case. It's simply because protecting an extremely niche problem, that being attempts to convert straight kids to LGBT, whether or not that issue exists, it is now also covered under this. And the bill helps provisions to protect therapists assisting in transitioning and helping troubled youths and young adults come to terms with their sexuality and explore themselves. Section 3, Subsection 2. Will protect teachers. Another concern I've seen a lot of online, allowing them to continue to discuss LGBT within institutions and schools for what one could argue is letting kids know that trans people exist. That could lead them to question their sexuality. I question mine regardless of knowledge in school, but I digress. This section prevents them from being prosecuted should a child convert under learned information from the teacher. Ultimately, I think the bill does a good job at addressing the concerns the previous bills put forth have driven within the LGBT, both on an individual level and concerns from institutions like Stonewall Law and Gallup. We've also been able to adequately discuss punitive measures in place against perpetrators and help define who will be charged in the event that a large institution like a congregation or a private company offering consulting on the matter. And on the topic of definitions, I think this bill has done a good job at defining terms in a way that encompasses the most possible impact without bridging on being so vague and expanding that it borderlines on all-encompassing to a degree it becomes useless. Whilst it would have been nice to see them repeat what was said in the Equalities Act, I don't think cross-reference of another bill that already serves to protect LGBT is necessarily a bad thing. For our auditory listeners, the Equalities Act 2010 defines sexual orientation as a person who is attracted to someone of the same sex, opposite sex, or persons of either sex. It's not a lot of words, it really should have been included, but again, it's not a major deal. I just think that it makes going through the bill a little bit more frustrating. I think a major con of this bill is the wording. Whilst the substance is there, it takes a level of understanding that a large portion of the population don't have. It's not a bill that you just inherently grasp upon first reading. It takes a bit of thought, and sometimes it's worded like riddles. Whilst I understand that the bill is not intended to be read by the average individual, and that it is ultimately up to those reporting on it to help translate it to the average individual, I would like to see a push for more inclusive legislation in writing. I think that this bill is just an example of being a particularly awkward one to read through. It's also worth noting that this bill is more than likely to get through. There is much more public buzz on the matter, and there seems to be an overwhelming support from both the public and Parliament. Supposing we don't get another snap election in the middle of this parliamentary session, then its timing couldn't be more perfect, since its introduction in June, near the end of spring, meaning it's got ample time left within this parliamentary session window. It's got backing by multiple parties across the political spectrum, it's got the king, and it's got multiple publications all backing it. And I've got to reiterate, the bill itself seems more than competent to achieve this goal, and would likely benefit LGBT people more than people think. I understand the concerns, and as mentioned a while ago, concern and skepticism in your government is a healthy thing. Blind trust is bad. I think today we've shown that if you do your due diligence and go through this bill piece by piece, we can clearly see that they've put thought and they have addressed these concerns well. Therapy? Check. Allow the practice to continue abroad under new names? Check. Adequate definitions of who could be affected? Check. Protects from being misused against the LGBT and medical practitioners? Check. Outlines precise punishments? Mostly. Introduces methods of protection prior to the event? Check. Affects all persons within the UK? No, but we'll come back to that. I hope that if you had any major concerns regarding this bill being used against us, that they have been quelled. Or at the very least, listened. It's normal to be distrustful, and this year has not been the best track record of trans rights from the UK government. But it is my assertion that we have demonstrated this bill is not a step backwards, but a step forward for LGBT rights. Now, I promised you a chat about CPPOs, and I would be so cruel as to deny you that treat, and it is oh so juicy a treat. Not to be confused with the Chinese Communist Party that I keep mistakenly calling the Chinese People's Party, CPPOs are court orders that are designed to protect vulnerable people prior to the conversion practice ever taking place. So how will they work? Well, these will operate on a case-by-case basis, wherein should someone be potentially at risk, or any individual can apply, or institutions in charge of the child can safely request one, the court will issue a CPPO, a Conversion Practice Protection Order. This is a special court order that makes any further attempts at using conversion practices against the vulnerable person and potential victim a strict criminal offence that won't require a burden of proof beyond the attempt itself, which will be up to the court's discretion. This creates a protective barrier around young people in hyper-religious communities, giving them an avenue through the law to get swift protection measures that would see punishment through the individual receiving a court order and continue their attempts. The court can impose travel bans, passport confiscation, stay-away orders, which is what we call restraining orders, from the potential victim, as well as imposing economic and asset sanctions on the perpetrators. CPPOs, whilst being a civil measure, help bridge the gap between civil and criminal. By having a court order, it makes it that would otherwise be a civil matter of coercion into contempt of court criminal matter, allowing for interested parties, i.e. people in child care protective services, to apply for a CPPO on behalf of another person. It can remove the concern of the child feeling like they're putting their family member in a worse off position than if they were to just endure the practice itself. This is an overall very productive inclusion, and whilst it's an extra 12 sections, there isn't necessarily much need to piece by piece here, as it's more spread out and quite frankly disjointed. But for those curious, I do implore you to go and read through the bill yourself. You can find the bill linked in the description below. So this bill explicitly mentions that it will only affect England and Wales. This is because Scotland has its own parliament and judiciary system.
But Wales has its own parliament too.
You're absolutely right. It does. The way powers are distributed amongst the United Kingdom is not universal. Where what is, for lack of a better term, a subsidiary of the UK Parliament gets its own playhouse, it is done through an Act of UK Parliament, which this Act ultimately defines the powers it does and does not have. These are known as devolved powers, and as part of the Scotland Act 1998 that gave Scotland its parliamentary seat in Holyrood, Edinburgh, we gained, among other things, the power of our own criminal justice system. This means that we're simply not governed by the same criminal laws that govern the UK in the vast majority of cases. There is, of course, a lot of overlap, but that is not because we follow English law, but because our interests often align with English laws. Wales simply doesn't have this devolved power yet, and as a result, is still under English jurisdiction. Northern Ireland is quite frankly a complicated area that I don't want to get sucked into right now, and no matter what I say on the topic, I will inevitably piss someone off and get something wrong, so for the sake of this discussion, Northern Ireland is on its own two legs and will not be beholden to Westminster here. We Scots like to pride ourselves on being better than England, a less desirable aspect of our people, but one that exists nonetheless. As a result, when England takes a step ahead of us, we like to bounce in and try and beat them to the punch. In 2024, we backpedaled after a public consultation spanning a few years, stating that it's just not an issue that we can stand alone on, with Holyrood instead deciding to wait and see how Westminster would tackle the issue, with the desire to follow their lead. It's been found that roughly 2/3 of Scottish public oppose conversion therapy and seek to see it banned. With a ban on conversion therapy being initially part of the SNP's manifesto of the seat of John Swinney, one he continues to sit on, there is mounting pressure from within the party itself alongside other parties to fulfill that initial policy, all of which being directly spurred on by the 2026 bill in Westminster. Our countries don't exist in a vacuum. There is push and pull, clear influence across the border, and we're falling behind. We don't like doing that. It is my stance that Scotland should adopt this bill into our own system, if not write a better, superior one, and I believe that the existence of the Conversion Practices Act 2026, as proposed by Olivia Bailey MP and co, will help push our country to ban this practice as well. That's why I think Scots really should care about this bill. At the start of this, I asked the question, is this bill an example of pessimism going too far, or are these fears warranted? For the last chunk of time, we've discussed what forms of conversion therapy are active, what methods are left in the past. We've looked at previous attempts at banning this, and we've discussed how other countries have succeeded. We've also looked at where they've fallen short. In doing all of this, we've created a list of requirements that the proposed bill would ultimately need to be truly comprehensive and effective. We've outlined what the definition would need to include, what kind of clauses would need to be present to protect genuine and earnest medical practitioners seeking to help LGBT navigate this difficult world, and we've noted the necessity to ensure a proposed bill would not be weaponized against the LGBT people. And I think that we've demonstrated that Olivia Bailey has done a well thought out and considered draft. Conversion Practices Act 2026 stands on its own as an example, in theory, of being an effective addition to the world map of countries that have effectively put a stop to this barbaric and inhumane practice. Practice that which the UN has stated could amount to a breach of human rights. And I want to just reiterate Gallup's findings. Roughly 1/5 of all LGBT people in this country will experience conversion practices at some point in their life. This is not a problem left in the past or something that needs to be forgotten about or moved on about. This is something that needs to be addressed now. And it is my belief, and I hope now yours too, that this problem has finally been addressed with the respect and candour it deserves by Olivia Bailey and the Equalities Office. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. It's been the single most comprehensive deep dive that I think I've ever done, and truly a fascinating one. I am glad that this story could have ended on a positive note, because it really could have gone another way. I had no real concrete idea of how the bill would be in effect before writing this script. So you've essentially come on this journey with me the entire way, and I hope that you've found solace in my findings, much as I have found solace in my own findings. I want to put a tremendous thanks towards Sylvia, the editor of the video, and all who have helped read through the script prior to filming. Your contributions have not gone unnoticed, and given the size of this document, it truly is a display of love and labour to have endured my ramblings of a script for that long. I want to make more content like this, but this has taken almost a month of reading and researching, coupled with more weeks of writing. God knows how long filming and editing is going to take. It's not a quick process. Anybody who knows about this will know, and who knows when the next legal deep dive will be. I do want to do them. I just want to say thank you once more for watching. Through everything, if you've made it this far, your viewership means a lot, and have a wonderful day or evening. I've been Take, signing off. Thank you. Hello, Mace. You're not supposed to be up there, darling. The NH shelf. NH shelf? NH shelf? What the fuck is an NH shelf? The cat is... Come here. mate. Yeah. You need to say mate? Nope. Our countries don't exist. And I've fucking completely lost where I am on the page. Okay, a more notable myth. This. The words are out there, they're not in my head. I don't know if it's visible, but I have a cat here. Hello? I hate this case. Wilkinson. Wilkinson. Why is that such a hard word? This thing in the right place. Oh, pose. Hababa.
Coercion therapy.
It's like performance art.
Special attack. Aversion therapy.
What's that one? It's like, oh, banning conversion therapy and introducing. Don't you start. Don't you start. I know. Cat being a bitch. We're talking about. Testing. I understand concerns, and as mentioned a while ago, concern and skepticism. This fucking word! Yeah, skepticism, it's coming back! Skepticism. CPPOs will be. CPP. CP. Shh. I'm being nibbled. Yeah. I don't.